if you remember all the way back to this morning, I know that was a while ago, but if you remember all the way back, one of the big things that we talked about was wanting this separation of concern. So the HTML is designed to say, hey, this is what our text is. So you'll notice, for example, that I've been using that article and I've been using that section. And what's very interesting about article and section is what they don't do. They don't do anything. That the only thing that they do is simply contain text. And then it's up to you to add the style in on your own using CSS. So we want to use CSS for all of our style. That's what CSS is there for. On top of that, one very big thing that we've sort of highlighted a bit of is performance. That up until now, we haven't done a single bit of JavaScript. And bad JavaScript is really what's going to slow your sites down. And so here, very simple little rule here. The fastest JavaScript code is the code you don't write. If you can do it, Deep Thoughts by Christopher Harrison. If you can do it without JavaScript, do it without JavaScript. Okay, well then let's talk about a couple of different things that we might typically do with JavaScript. And one of them is transformations. That let's say, going back to the article that we had a couple seconds ago, that I wanted to change the color of those little links. Or maybe I wanted to put in a little bit of a background on them. But if I put my mouse over it, it's just automatically going to throw that color onto there. It'd be nice to have a little fade effect. And then when I pull my mouse away, have a little fade effect and have that go away again. Wouldn't that be nice?
That sounds beautiful.
It sounds
a little
fantastic.
fade in, fade out.
Yeah. And you're probably thinking, okay, well that's going to be dynamic, right? So that must mean JavaScript. Ah, so we're talking about style. So we can do this with CSS. The other very big thing that you might be looking to do is to resize things. So one of the big things that Helen was showing off before with the media queries was going in and resizing different elements or hiding different elements. What happens if we want to be able to just globally resize something, just make it bigger, make it smaller? Well, fortunately, we can do that as well with our transformations, and that's actually where we're going to start. That our transformations allow us to take items and manipulate them. So if you want to rotate them, if you want to skew them, if you want to resize them, you can do this all through CSS. Now, because of the fact that this is done with CSS, this can be done with any class, with any element, and with any media query. So if all that you need to do is just simply take a particular div block and resize that down, you can do that without having to go into all the different fonts and all the different sizes and calculate everything. You can just simply say, be smaller, and it will be smaller for you. Now, what are some of the different things that we can do? Well, the first thing that we can do is translate. Remember how we've been talking in the past about how it's not always intuitive, some of the names. Translate does mean move.
Yeah.
At least to me, that doesn't scream move.
Yeah. I think once you're out of geometry class for more than a year or so, you forget the whole translate thing, unless you deal with CSS on a regular basis.
Yep. Yeah, we forgot to warn everybody, there's going to be math today. We're going to bring everybody back to geometry class. So anyway, so what translate's going to do is it's going to move an element from one location to another. So if we go back to my slide, I spent hours working on this animation. Barry, I want to make sure that I show this off. Are you ready? Here we go. Ooh. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Nicely translated.
Nice. Yeah, so it actually, moved it to somewhere else on the page. Now, I did the animation mostly just because I wanted to show examples in the slide of each one of these, because I'm not going to demo each one of these. I threw the animations in. I do want to stress, however, it doesn't work like this out of the box. So, sort of like, you're watching some commercial for some toy and it shows it doing something in the little disclaimer down at the very bottom. Toy doesn't actually dance or sing. It doesn't automatically move, but we can, do that. So keep in mind that when you set one of these transformations, it's going to apply to that element right then and there. If you want it to transition, we can do that, but that's going to require a transition, and we'll get to that in a little while here. Scale is going to resize. So you'll notice here my scale, and ooh, it's going to get bigger. See, there we go. Again, these animations spend hours. Rotate. It's going to rotate the element. There we go. And then skew is going to, and I couldn't make this happen very easily, so there it is. It's going to skew it. So you'll notice that my little borders here are off to the side. So those are all the different transformations that you can do. And then you can also do none. And there's my animation for none. That did take the longest. The reason that none exists is it gives you the ability just to disable everything. That one of the things that can happen sometimes with CSS, especially when you start playing around with things like media queries, is something might happen on one media query and then it doesn't automatically get reset later on. So by my going in and saying transformation none, that will turn off all transformations. So if something else had said something, maybe that property was still applying for one reason or another, this allows me just to turn that right off. Okay. So now let's go in and do all of those different translations. Okay, so there's my little page here, and all I want to do is just resize something. And actually, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it a little bit simpler on myself. I'm just going to say add, and I'm going to say HTML page, and this is going to be my resize demo, and let's just go in and add in a real quick div, and let's give this an ID resize me, and let's go in and say style, and let's go in and say pound resize me, and I'm going to go in and say height, and let's say 100 pixels, and then let's say width, and let's say 100 pixels. And now I want to resize that. So what I'm going to do is just simply say transform, and you are going to notice that every single browser has it implemented, and there's vendor-specific tags for every single one of them. A lot of browsers, I would even venture to say most browsers, do now support just simply transform, and that is well, that's kind of cool. And that is what I'm going to use here because it will work. Keep in mind, however, that if you just use transform, older browsers may complain. So just kind of keep that in mind. But now what I'm going to do is I'm just simply going to hit my colon, and you'll notice that there's all of the different transformations that I can set up here. And you're going to notice on here that there are a few that I didn't actually get in and mention, in particular in the land of 3D. So if you actually want to flip things in a third dimension, you can do that. And, there's been a lot of talk about images, and kind of dealing with images. One very big thing that you can do is use SVG graphics, the scalable vector. And so you can actually just go in and declaratively say, hey, this is how I want things. And so by using these little transformations, you can draw the flat surface and then flip that and move that backwards and forwards and so forth, all on that third dimensional plane. So you can really get pretty advanced with the different transformations that are available to you. In my case, though, I'm going to go ahead and say translate, and that's going to give me the ability to move this from the left and from the top. So I'm going to say 200 pixels and 200 pixels, and then I'm going to add in a resize, scale rather. There we go. And let's go ahead and scale this. Now the scale is going to be a number-based percentage. So if you want to double it in size, that means you're going to use the number 2 to scale that. And you can actually scale on both the X and the Y axis. And let me actually move this kind of a little bit more center here. So I'm just going to say 400 and 400. There we go. Okay. So let's go in and fire this up. Oh, it would help if I set a background color on that. Otherwise, we're just going to wind up with a white box and a white background. Background, color, and blue. There we go. And
okay.
There we go. All right. No comma. That was where my mistake was. So now what you're going to notice is that it has been moved down, moved over, and you're going to notice that it's been resized. Cool. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking. A lot of you are probably thinking, okay, that's fine and all, but I don't get it. Why in the world am I going to want to just hard code this into a style and just have it be resized? Well, the first big reason is if you were using media queries. So that way, if I do need to resize something for a media query, that allows me to very easily do that. In fact, here, let's just kind of do this real quick here, is I'm going to add in my media, and I'm going to say min width colon 500 pixels. There we go. And then let's go in and set that up inside of Resize Me. So Resize Me. Boop. And boop. And boop, boop. All right. Now, there is my little resize for my min width. So as a result, when it's small, you'll notice small. And then when we get up to big, now you're going to notice that it's bigger. So that's the first big reason why you might decide to use that. The second reason that you might decide to go in and use those little translates is this can oftentimes be an easier way to resize things than trying to do everything with JavaScript. So what I can do is combine this with a bit of JavaScript and then just simply set that style property and add in the transform that way. And I'm actually going to get to that at the very end. I know we haven't done any JavaScript, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't at least show off a little bit of JavaScript, in particular with jQuery, because so often when you're talking about different jQuery extensions, the way that they're making their magic happen is just by adding and removing classes. So it would be nice to show off kind of how that's done and do that with a little bit of resizing. So we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. Okay.